Welcome to Popcorn Unscripted, the podcast where we dive into movies and TV shows with no scripts, no filters, just real talk and plenty of popcorn. From timeless classics to the newest releases, it's all about real opinions and unfiltered conversation. I'm your host, Bailey, and let's grab some popcorn, sit back, and let the show begin. If you've ever listened to a true crime podcast and thought, I could totally solve a murder, this show was made for you. Welcome to episode 44. So, today we are talking about season 1 of Only Murders in the Building. This is my third time watching through season 1, and I still absolutely adore it. I grew up with all three of the main actors for this show. Steve Martin, I know him from Cheaper by the Dozen 1 and 2. Martin Short, I know him from the Santa Claus 3, where he played Jack Frost. And then, of course, I am one of the people that grew up with Selena Gomez, with her on Wizards of Waverly Place. So, all three of these people I grew up watching. Not even really knowing their names, except for Selena Gomez, of course, and Steve Martin. I honestly didn't know Martin Short, but it works out. It works out. But I did in fact recognize him when I saw him in this show. I was like, that's Jack Frost. Just because of his mannerisms and the way he was speaking, I was just like, that's Jack Frost from the Santa Claus 3. That's who that is. I know exactly who that is. And it was a joy to watch all three of them in this show. And I actually kind of have a funny story about this show too. This show is one of the reasons I actually started this podcast to begin with. It's because of this show that I started this podcast. Well, it's really this show that gave me the idea to start this podcast. And also there was a tweet on Twitter that had said something along the lines of nobody puts out any good criticisms of movies and TV shows anymore because everybody talks about the actors and actresses and more so the drama about stuff than they do the actual movies and TV shows. And so I essentially took it upon myself to start this and to do this continuously. And this is something that's become a real passion for me. I've looked at movies that I've wanted to watch for a while. I've looked at TV shows I've wanted to watch for a while. Like, this, of course, this is the... actually, no, this would be the third TV show I've talked about so far. Because I'm still trying to figure out a template for talking about a TV show. So, but yeah, so... yeah, this is the show that pretty much sparked the idea of, hey, you should do a podcast. And I adored the first season quite a lot. It had a lot of charm to it. I absolutely love the intro for this show. I don't ever skip the intro for this show. And because to me, it's a long, it just scratches an itch in my brain, because I'm very musically inclined, and it just scratches the itch in my brain that it just makes me feel so satisfied to hear it. I guess you could say it gives me like a little bit of a, not a dopamine rush, but it's just incredible. It just scratches an itch in my brain. But no, I had wanted to watch this show for a while because I know last year it was up for a bunch of Emmys. It's been Emmy nominated, I don't know how many times. And so I've really wanted to watch this. I've wanted to watch this show. I've wanted to watch The Bear. I've wanted to watch Abbott Elementary. All of those were really, really big last year because a lot of them got Emmy nominated last year. And so yeah, those were the big three last year that I really wanted to watch, and it wasn't until this year that I actually got into Only Murders in the Building. Hopefully, I'll eventually start watching The Bear and Abbott Elementary, and I think there's another one that got Emmy nominated that's about like a house full of ghosts, and they're all from different time periods, and I like funny things, so I'm one of those people that I really have to sit down and watch it in order to, it's weird. I have to binge watch the whole first season, or else I'm gonna go crazy trying to think of what's gonna happen and stuff. But anyway, but I liked the idea of like only murders in the building. Like, I just liked the idea of that. I honestly didn't really know what I was getting into. All I knew is that it was going to be funny, and it had Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez in it. That's really all I knew about when I went to watch this show. Really, I was just sitting in my little gaming area, and I was like, I want to watch something, so that's what I turned on. And so the spark was there. There is for sure a fine line between murder mystery, comedy, and also heartfelt drama. It's a great mix of all three of those, because because not only do you have like the character development like weaved through this, but you also have the murder mystery, and then you also have like love interests coming in for Mabel and Charles, and then of course you have the greed side for Oliver, as well, because he's kind of like he's like struggling for cash at the moment, and he's kind of like trying to pull as many strings as he could, and he just wants he really just wants money so he can be stable once again, because he's had so many failures. And I don't blame him, because honestly I'm kind of in the same boat as him at the moment, and so I get it. Pull as many strings as you can, do what you can, and I'm kind of in the same boat as him. So I will say Oliver is my favorite, mainly because me and him have similar last names, except two of the letters are flipped. So I just think it's kind of funny. But yes, Oliver is my favorite, by far, my favorite character, by far. But getting into the plot of the season, so in the beginning, in the first episode, Charles sets the stage. He leads us into the Arconia, which technically all three of them do, because you hear all three of them introduce you to set the stage of New York and the Arconia, and all three of them kind of shows you to the point where they all meet in the elevator. That's like the key point is right there. And then of course you have Tim Kono, who was unfortunately the person that is murdered in this season. You have him, and then all of that. It kind of all unfolds within this first season. Because they all I just love that all three of them had come together because of a murder podcast that they were listening to, which I can't remember the name of that podcast. It's something about Oklahoma, but yeah. So first episode really set the tone for the rest of the season and what we could possibly expect for these characters, which of course we don't really know anything about these characters in the first episode, but it really established the relationship that the three of these characters have. And I genuinely think that between Charles and Mabel, I genuinely think that's like a father-daughter relationship right there, with a crazy fun uncle thrown in the mix. And so that's the kind of dynamic that I'm getting, because Charles really ends up really caring for Mabel and actually really wanting to be there for her and take care of her. And, and then of course Oliver's kind of there as like the fun uncle, because between him and Charles, I genuinely feel like they could be brothers. Like unrelated brothers. I think there's like a brotherly kind of bond between them, from my perspective of it. And then Mabel's just kind of there. So that's why I think Oliver's more like the fun uncle. And then you have Charles that's like the older brother, I guess you could say, because I feel like Charles is wiser than Oliver in some aspects. And then in others, Oliver is more So it's kind of funny because Tim Kono dies, and then Oliver is the one who's like, oh, we should do a podcast, because, he's trying to think of ways to make money, and he, of course, being in show business and stuff, I don't recall if he knew anything about podcasting at the start, but he probably has, since he's in like the show business and things of that nature. So I genuinely think he probably had an idea of what needed to happen, and he did the research on what he needed to make it happen. And so you have that as well. So you have these three, I would call them misfits, is what I would kind of call them, because you have the old actor that's from an old TV show, who's not really working at the moment, and he's kind of alone and by himself. And then you have Mabel, who's living in an apartment during a renovation that she's supposed to be doing for her aunt, and she's also kind of a loner as well. She doesn't really interact with anybody. And then of course you have Oliver, which that could be why Charles and Mabel kind of have a father-daughter type relationship, because they are similar. They are similar within personalities, because they are both loners. And then you have Oliver, who's this like really bubbly, extroverted person, and I think he's one that really brought them all together. I genuinely think Oliver is the one that brought them all together, because if it wasn't for Oliver, the podcast wouldn't have even happened, and the three of them probably wouldn't have investigated any further. But then again, Mabel was going to come up to Charles to go search through the trash and stuff, so she was going to go. So really, I don't really know, because I genuinely think Oliver is the one that kind of pushed for it. Well, I guess you could say it was more so Mabel, since she was coming to get Charles at first, and then all three of them, somehow Oliver got in there. Oh, no, they were going downstairs, and Oliver ended up having the same idea, or not having the same idea, but they all end up going down there to search through the trash and stuff, and then that's when Oliver's like, oh, we should do our own podcast and stuff, And so, you have that as well. And so, as time progresses, it's like the mystery worked so well, because in this first season, you genuinely had no clue who could have done it. Like, you were learning you knew about as much as the characters did, which is what I love about this show. It's like, I love that you couldn't predict who it was. Because, of course, it ended up being Jan, who ended up being, like, Charles' lover in this season. And, she was just a huge curveball. Which, of course, if you're watching this season for the first time, it is a big curveball. Because I was like, I genuinely thought it was going to be the Demuses that had done it. And it was obviously not. But when Oliver had brought out the toys, the sex toys, he had brought out the sex toys, and he was swinging the thing around, I didn't think anything of it. I didn't even know what kind it was. I was just like, I don't even know what that is, and I kind of don't want to know what that is. But ultimately, we end up finding that it is a bassoon cleaner, which is what ends up connecting it to Jan. Which is, again, why I think it was such a curveball. Because you had the sex toys at the start, but it was such a curveball because they didn't really analyze this. They didn't really analyze. They were just like, oh, ew, gross. Like, he was into some kinky stuff, apparently. But yeah, it was just like a second thought, It was kind of a lot like the cat, because the cat was poisoned, and the Evelyn had died, and nobody had really had a second thought of that either. But then we come to find out that Tim Kono was poisoned before he was shot, so he was already dead before he was shot. And that was due to the toxicology report that doesn't happen until episode 7 or 8. And then that's when the investigation really kicks up. Is when they get all of that. It really kicks up after they nail the Demuses. Which, of course, they nail the Demuses because, of course, they have, like, a grave robbing side business, and also Theo was the one that ended up pushing Mabel's friend off the roof 10 years ago at a New Year's Eve party. And so it's just so much to just look at for this season, but it all flows together so well. Like, it keeps you on your toes. Like, when I first watched this, I genuinely did not suspect Jan at all. Even in the episode where she was trying to throw him off by saying, oh, you should look at the cat. You should, like, what if he did it, And I was just like, why are you saying that? The cat, like, he obviously didn't do it because he faints at the sight of blood, first of all. And 2, if his cat was poisoned, then, and how, like, he would have went through the lengths for his cat not to be poisoned, right? You would, like, obviously, we were like, obviously he didn't do it. She's just throwing out BS for some reason because, attention grabber, I guess you could say. But, I was just like, no, it's not even the cat. Go away. I even wanted Jan to go away, along with Mabel and Oliver. I was just like, get her out of there. She doesn't even know what she's talking about. And so, I digress. There were certainly a lot of red herrings and twists in this show. Of course, the cat being one of the red herrings, which, of course, to come back that, in its toxicology report, that it was a certain type of poison, that ended up killing the cat. So, that's one, and then, what's another red herring? That's really the only red herring I can think of at the moment. But there was certainly a lot of twists to this as well. Tie-dye guy being, of course, one of Mabel's Hardy Boys, and and of course he lied to her at first when they were driving to wherever it was they're driving to. But I also liked that him and Mabel kind of, got back together, and they had like a shared bond because they lost 2 friends, and they were grieving together. It was like it's like the perfect relationship right there, if I'm going to be honest. But I digress. The ending was certainly satisfying. Nothing was ever really too obvious. I don't think anything was really perfectly planted. I mean, yeah, I guess you could say everything was perfectly planted. Because all of the leads and stuff, everything that built up to Jan's reveal was certainly planted very well. Because we didn't even know about Jan until, maybe episode 3, 4? We don't even get introduced to her until, like, later on in the season. And so, it's kind of shocking, because we've already met everybody in episode 1 and 2, maybe 3, and then she just kind of shows up out of the blue, but she's been there the whole time. So it's kind of crazy, and it was that way with Tie-Dye Guy as well. That's what I'm going to refer to him to, because I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but yeah, everything fit perfectly, and the pacing across all 10 episodes was amazing as well. The episodes were about 30, at least 30 minutes long, give or take a few minutes, which was perfect, because I was able to kind of space it out. Like, I watched the first half of the season this morning, and then I was able to watch the other half later, and still remember everything, which, again, this is like my third time watching this first season, to begin with. But the dynamic between Steve Martin and Selena was absolutely incredible. I loved the chemistry the three of them have. I know they've been doing a bunch of interviews and stuff lately, and even in the interviews and stuff, they have that same dynamic as they do in the show, which I absolutely love. And so it's an amazing dynamic, and I adore it very, very much. Again, Oliver's my favorite. He's quirky. He's like trying to think of different angles and different ways to do things, favorite scenes. Do I have any favorite scenes? I don't think I really have any specific favorite scenes, but my favorite episode is the silent episode, where you see everything through Theo Demas's eyes, essentially, or you see it from his perspective, where there's no there's nobody talking, which was a very interesting play on this it was just very interesting, and I liked that episode for that reason, because it's such an interesting way to go about a deaf episode, and going through the eyes of someone that is deaf, really, and it's really cool. And then, of course, you see how the whole thing with Zoe played out, which was Maple's friend that got pushed off the roof, unintentionally. I genuinely think she had brought that upon herself because she was pushing Theo. I genuinely think it was not Theo's fault. I genuinely think she just kind of lost her balance, tried to hold on to him, and he tried to grab her, but unfortunately he didn't grab her in time. I genuinely think it was not Theo's fault. I think she kind of brought that upon herself, and it was her fault that she died that night. You can, agree to disagree, but I genuinely think it was her fault that she died that night. I genuinely think Theo didn't do that which obviously he didn't have any intentions of hurting her, but she was intoxicated, for sure intoxicated. She had just had an argument with her boyfriend, and she was feeling just all kinds of emotions, and of course Theo saying all the things he said kind of triggered her, and so that's what ended up killing her, really, if I'm going to be really honest here, if I do my takes. But let's see, I do like the scene where the four of them come into the Demas's apartment to play to do the Hardy Boys thing that they always do, and he ended up seeing Zoe through the peephole, where their secret room was, and she actually ended up noticing that, and I also think it was cool that Zoe knew ASL and was able to communicate with him. I genuinely thought that was cool, because for a deaf person, I think it's rare to meet somebody that actually knows ASL. I actually worked with a deaf person, which of course he had implants and stuff, so he could hear, but it was cool to kind of meet somebody with that kind of disability. I genuinely wish I could learn how to do ASL. It probably isn't difficult, but it's just remembering, like, what certain words are, and, I genuinely think if you are deaf, you have to be really good at lip reading. I genuinely think you have to have a really good lip reading skill, which of course Theo did. To him, I think it was like his superpower, where he's able to read not only lips, but he could also do the ASL as well. So I genuinely think that's like a superpower deaf people have, is being able to read people's lips, and because it is difficult. I would say it is difficult because of the way people do their syllables and things of that nature, especially with somebody that has an accent and stuff, and the way they move their mouth. I genuinely think you could misinterpret a lot of things by far. But that episode, I think that's episode 6 or 7. I think it's episode 6. That's the deaf episode, the silent episode. But yeah, I also, I love Theo as a character. I just adore that character a lot. He's probably my second favorite character, is Theo Demas. Just because he tries to embrace this disability, but he knows that he disappoints his father, because his father even says, like, I didn't even want to accept that I had a deaf child, and that was sad to hear as an audience member. That was sad to hear, and I'm glad Theo was driving at the time and couldn't read his father's lips when he said that to Mabel and Oliver in the car. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Theo did feel like a disappointment to his father, and of course, he also has this dynamic with his father where his father won't even listen to his own son, and he obviously did not heed his son's words, and they ended up getting busted for their grave robbing, and for the murder of Zoe as well. So yeah. Standout supporting characters, again, Theo. I really liked Theo a lot. Howard, I did like it. Like, I have watched the other 4 seasons, and I like how their character developed, but Howard wasn't really in this season that I remember, other than the cat. I think that was really the only reason he was in this. And then, of course, I think I generally like Bunny. Bunny's just kind of like one of those, like, what have you, kind of people. And so I did like Bunny. Let's see. I'm trying to think. I liked the 3 fans as well. They didn't come in until, like, later on when they were trying to bust the Demases, but I generally think all 3 of them were pretty cool. I actually like the fans' names for fans of Oliver, Putnuts. I actually liked that a lot, because I think that was kind of funny. But I can't remember what the other 2 were for Mabel and Charles. I don't remember what those were. But again, I think it was pretty funny, regardless. And then, of course, you have Martin Short's chaos energy versus Steve Martin's deadpan sort of emotion, like, sort of deadpan kind of look, and it's just gold. The dynamic between Martin Short and Steve Martin is just comedy gold. Like, they are I would say they are an ultimate comedy duo. Like, you can't, like, it's amazing. And I think they had went on, like, a tour. I didn't even know that was going on until Steve Martin actually got diagnosed with COVID, like, a few days ago, as of recording this. And it's kind of funny, because I had COVID, not last week, but the week before last. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting to hear about that kind of stuff. And so, but yeah, the dynamic between him and Martin Short is comedy gold. I don't even think you could beat that even if you tried, because of who they are. And of course, they did a movie together with the guy from what's those other Christmas movies? Christmas Vacation, with the guy from Christmas Vacation, and they did the three amigos. I can't remember what they're called, but they have worked together before, so it's kind of like, it's kind of like they're stepping back into those types of shoes. So with their podcast sort of angle, it's meta in the best way possible. A podcast about a murder, about a podcast about a murder, it all kind of just stacks upon each other. To be fair, I'm not really a part of the true crime sort of podcast culture, but I do like mysteries, and I do like those kinds of things, because I do read James Patterson's Alex Cross series that I absolutely adore. And so from my perspective, I think it parodied true crime culture fairly well, because most of the time, which of course most true crime podcasts go through a case that's been cold or has already been they pretty much go through cold cases, I think. And then it kind of they go into we think this person did it with the evidence that has been presented, and the evidence that we do have that the police had gotten. We think it's probably this person, trying to solve the case. But I don't think most true crime podcasts during this age actually does what they do, and actually go through and collect evidence, and and things of that nature. I think podcasts during right now, I think they just do they just go through the files that the police have, and they just go through all the evidence that the police had gathered and stuff. I don't think they actually go out of their way to do that, and if they do, send me the podcasts, please, because I want to listen to that. But it did feel like a bit of a gimmick, but it's brilliant in a way. This show, as I've said, this show just works all together so well. The story just worked, and I loved the dynamics in this show. I loved how everything connected together. I like how, even though this is my third watch, I like how you can actually now see how it leads up to Jan being the killer, because of course the first thing you find is the sex toys. Of course, that's your first lead right there. And then of course, as time goes on, you find the notes, and then of course Charles compares the handwriting to the, and that's another clue right there. But of course, by that time that he gets that note from Jan, it's still we're still on maybe, I think we're still on the Demuses or something, or I don't even think they have a prime suspect still. By the time him and Jan actually go on their first date. But yeah, any moments that made me laugh because I'm now a podcaster? No, not in particularly, but I did find it funny when Mabel was, when they were going through this kind of rough patch, where they were trying to decide whether or not to continue or stop, because this is starting to be personal because of Mabel. I think, how did it go? I think she gave them the permission to, like, keep going, but she was like, just don't do TikTok. Don't do TikTok. And so, there's that as well. But this show is certainly unlike anything I've ever watched before. I do like comedic stuff because I like Young Sheldon. I like The Big Bang Theory. I sometimes go back and watch the old cartoons that I would used to watch as a kid, you know. I generally don't really watch that much TV, to be honest with you. I don't watch a whole lot of TV, but if there's a show that piques my interest, then I would give it a shot. For sure. So we're gonna get a little bit deeper into the themes and things. So this show is not just about solving a murder. Like, of course, that's like the main thing, but it's not just about that. It's about connection, loneliness, and purpose. Because you have Charles's reclusive past due to being in a relationship for 6 years, and then he ends up getting, like, abandoned on a cruise. We ended up finding a little bit about why he doesn't want anything to do with people, and I honestly don't blame him at all, because people can be awful. People can be rude and difficult, and it's just, you know. And I love how at the end, because Lucy is brought up she's brought up a few times, but I like how in the last episode Charles actually finally reaches out to her, because I think through this whole story he finally is able to heal his wounds that have hurt him so deeply. He was able to heal those wounds and then be able to come back and talk to Lucy and actually see what she's doing, what she's up to, things of that nature. And then you have Oliver's desperation for a comeback, which I've kind of brushed on because he desperately wants to get back on top. And that's one of his main goals throughout this season, is like he's trying to figure out how to get back on top. He's trying to get money so he can make this podcast like a big production sort of thing. He wants to, and as you watch through the season, you can see the equipment that they use slowly upgrades. Like, especially in the last episode, you can see the microphone that Charles talks into is upgraded to an even better quality microphone. And so it's like throughout the season you can see that Oliver kind of progresses the equipment that they've got and progresses, like, figuring out how a podcast works and such. So he does use his phone a lot to record, which I find interesting because for me, like, just using my phone speaker is not the best way to record on a phone for some whatever reason. It could be because of some settings. But I use like an external microphone that I can just plug into my phone and it'll just connect together. That's what I would use. That's what I use whenever I go sit in a theater live and stuff. So if I'm actually doing a podcast episode on something that I'm going to watch in the theater. I know I haven't done it that way since Fantastic Four, I believe. I haven't done it that way, but then again, here lately, when I go to the movies, I'm very unprepared, and I don't go to the movies with the intention of doing an episode at the moment. Maybe I should be more prepared doing that, and stuff. And so I'll have to get back to doing that because that's actually kind of fun. But I digress. And then you have Mabel's unresolved trauma, which we slowly discover what it is throughout the first season. We come to find out that she used to she used to come stay in the Arconia, and that's how she was able to form the Hardy Boys Pact and it come to find out she knew Tim Kono, and she was like it's a whole past of trauma. And of course we get to meet her mother in this season as well. And so you have that sort of dynamic there, because she tells her mother, I'm fine, this is fine, I'm fine. You know, and of course it's unresolved. But as the case gets more and more closer to figuring out who it is, she also heals. A lot like Charles, she also heals that trauma, because now she has closure for not just Tim Kono, but also for Zoe, as well. And Oscar, that's his name. That's tie-dye guy's name, Oscar. And he gets his closure for being in jail and stuff. He gets his closure as well. But through these three people certainly became a family throughout this whole thing, and it's absolutely beautiful and incredible to watch. And I would watch this over and over and over again. I genuinely would. This season, by far, this season is just incredible. This was an incredible first season, for sure. Best episodes or moments, as I said, the silent episode, which is the boy from 6B, that's what the title of that episode is. I think that's episode 6. That one's my favorite by far. And then of course you have Who is Tim Kono? I think that one's either episode 2 or 3. Where you kind of learn who Tim Kono is. I think that's episode 2, actually. Where they go into his apartment and, and they discover, or maybe it might be episode 3, actually. It might actually be episode 3. And then you have the final episode that leads into season 2, where you're just left with Mabel be all bloody, and she has just stabbed Bunny in the chest with her knitting needle, which of course she said that she has this dream where a man is standing above her and she ends up stabbing him with her knitting needle. And so, yeah. But I digress. Those were some of my favorite moments in episodes by far in this first season. But Only Murders in the Building somehow manages to be hilarious, heartfelt, and genuinely intriguing, and that's pretty hard to pull off, but it pulled it off amazingly. So here's my questions for you guys. Did you guess the killer before the finale? Because if you did, I need to have a word with you, because how? Because how? How did you know? How did you know? And also, who's your favorite character? And who is your favorite character? Of course, mine's Oliver. But I want to hear your thoughts about that. And also, should every apartment complex come with a murder mystery? Because genuinely, this is something unique and new and exciting, and I don't think you could ever get another TV show like this one. I genuinely don't think you could get another TV show like this one. That's a wrap on today's episode of Popcorn Unscripted. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. New episodes drop every Monday and Friday, so be sure to tune in. Until next time, keep your popcorn close and your movie critiques closer. Thanks for listening to Popcorn Unscripted.